Hey guys, Pie Guy Rules here, and welcome to the first of hopefully many character studies, where I plan on taking an in-depth look at a number of characters from a ton of different shows. I'm going to talk about their character traits, how they interact with other characters, what times I think the characters work in the story, what time I think the characters don't really work in the story, talk about every single appearance the character has made, and in general, just talk about the character. We're gonna start with Beach City's conspiracy nut, Ronaldo Fryman from Steven Universe. So let's begin by giving a rundown of all of the episodes that Ronaldo's been in. First of all, there's Frybo, which stars Ronaldo's little brother Petey. Ronaldo has a non-speaking cameo here, and it's his first appearance. Its sister episode, Catfingers, introduces him properly along with his blog, though he doesn't have much screen time. In Steven's Lion, he is impressed by Steven's claims of a pink lion, and it's the first time we really get to see a glimpse of who he is. Keep Beach City Weird was the first episode to really focus on Ronaldo. We'll be talking about that one a little bit more in depth later. Ronaldo doesn't appear in the episode Garnet's Universe, but the character Ringo is loosely based off of him, in looks and the fact that he's themed after a fast food snack. Ringo's just a character in a story Steven is telling. It's a little bit weird why Steven would make this character be loosely based on Ronaldo, when the two really don't have much in common, and Steven doesn't think Ronaldo is a bad guy, even though Ringo is in the story. The only thing remotely similar is the fact that the guy who plays Ringo's rival in this episode is also the guy that voices Lars. It's not too important to anything, at least I don't think so. There wasn't really any hidden meaning there, so I don't think I need to talk about it any further, but I think it was worth mentioning. In Watermelon Steven, Ronaldo gets one of Steven's watermelons and attempts to do an alien autopsy on one on a live stream. Horror Club is the second episode to really focus on Ronaldo, and another one we'll be looking at in depth later on. This episode focuses on his relationship with Lars. He has a somewhat important, although brief, appearance in the episode Full Disclosure, where he convinces Steven that he should walk alone as a tortured hero. His third, and as of right now, most recently major appearance is in the episode Rising Tides, Crashing Skies, where he's actually the protagonist of the episode, and he makes a lame documentary where he investigates the crystal gems. Once more, we'll be talking about this one in detail later on. Ronaldo gets a single line in the episodes Tiger Millionaire, Secret Team, and Shirt Club. In addition to all this, he has a non-speaking cameo in Steven and the Stevens, Mirror Gem, Ocean Gem, Alone Together, Political Power, The Return, and Historical Friction. Before we talk about his character traits, let's talk about his name and appearance. His hair is shaped like curly fries because he works at his dad's fry place, and his name is Ronaldo, possibly as an allusion to Ronald McDonald. But you probably already knew that. Anyway, moving on. There are two major character traits about Ronaldo. The first one, and the one at the most forefront of all of his episodes, is his love of the supernatural and conspiracies surrounding the supernatural. As I stated in my Steven Universe review, I find the character to be hit or miss, and I'm not the only one. Sometimes he's funny, and he works perfectly as an allegory for conspiracy nuts in the real world. Other times, he's painfully awkward to watch and doesn't gel with the rest of the show and its tone at all. The thing about Ronaldo is that he is very close to becoming the character that is ignorant to the world around them, in the same way that characters like SpongeBob, Patrick, and Tree Trunks are. Quite frankly, that kind of shtick of a character who just doesn't affect anything around them and has no clue what is going on but thinks they know everything can get very annoying if not put in the right hands. Sometimes it can be funny, but other times it's a character that just does a bunch of random things that don't have anything to do with anything that's actually happening in the episode. When a character's logic is so far off of your logic, it can be really irritating unless it's funny or has a purpose. Steven Universe is a show that, while comedic at times, is a lot more focused on having relatable, interesting characters and telling really character-motivated stories, which is why Ronaldo's goofiness does not always work. The way I see it, his actions in Keep Beach City Weird and Horror Club are used as more than just jokes. They actually take his craziness and tell two, quite frankly, sad stories with it. His weirdness has a purpose. So let's start by talking about Keep Beach City Weird. It's actually about a deconstruction of his behaviors as a clear allegory for lies people tell themselves to stay happy. You can insert any sort of group that you think does this in your own head. I'm not going to give examples, but there are very clearly people in the real world and groups in the real world that tell themselves very obvious lies, and those lies are actually what makes them happy, because rather than having to actually think and challenge and be confronted with some of the sad, harsh, creepy truths of the world, they would rather believe these little lies that make them happy. But you don't need to take my word for it. Pearl even says this in the episode. That's pretty spot on, and way more real than you'd ever expect a cartoon to get. The truth is, there are people like Ronaldo out there, and the episode takes an interesting look at the truth versus happiness, and how they aren't always going to go hand in hand. It's a sad ending because Ronaldo is clearly a danger to himself and others, and a total joke to the community, but the only way he can happily function is through his delusions. The show, and Steven, do not treat him like a wacky loser in this episode, but as someone who has issues and should probably get some kind of help. And that is why I think he works well here. And that's not to say he isn't funny either. He definitely is. Parts of this episode are really funny, like with the Sneeple thing. But he's more than just weird, wacky comic relief, and that's exactly what you'd expect from this show. Characters who can be both funny and sad. Another interesting thing about the episode is that at the end, Ronaldo is actually onto something. Look at that quote. He's right. Gems did try to hollow out the earth to build more gems. And at this point in the series, it seems very likely that the Diamond Authority is a real thing. Granted, it does come off as more of a broken clock being right twice a day, instead of Ronaldo actually using logic to reach a solution, but still, it's something to think about. In the episode Horror Club, I also think he works well as a character. It really isn't about his conspiracy. It's more about his former relationship with Lars and his new friendship with Sadie, as well as the dynamic between the three of them, and Steven just being along for the ride. He was a lot more down to earth in this episode, which makes sense because in Keep Beach City Weird, his entire way of life was challenged. It kinda makes sense that he'd go off the deep end there, versus here where he's a lot more laid back. And the only thing crazy he's really on about is a ghost, which actually is kind of reasonable when you consider the events that are happening right in front of them. And in a way, he's not entirely wrong. A poofed gem that can possess a lighthouse is almost like a ghost. So the episode shows Ronaldo and Lars having a falling out as kids. And though the episode seems to put most of the blame on Lars's prideful attitude, I personally think that it's equally Ronaldo's fault for the falling out, putting his love of the supernatural over his friend's feelings. And let's be honest, that picture wasn't much proof of anything anyway. The end result would have absolutely made Lars look stupid. Though of course, Lars could have certainly been more respectful to Ronaldo instead of just instantly tearing up the picture and acting like the prideful jerk that he is afterwards. I think Ronaldo really works here because he is a real, relatable character, and not just some crazy, hard-to-relate to conspiracy nut. So, that brings us to Rising Tides, Crashing Skies. I really don't think Ronaldo's character works very well here, for one simple reason. He does not make a good protagonist. Outside of a few Greg episodes, almost every single episode of this show is from Steven's perspective. That means it's a big change to switch perspectives, and Ronaldo's perspective is, quite frankly, insane. Before I go any further, I need to establish my feelings about the episode as a whole. I don't actually hate it. It's a pretty funny episode, and stylistically it nails the whole Windows Movie Maker homemade YouTube documentary vibe. But by the end of the episode, both the comedy and the style begin to get old. Though what really sinks this episode is the story, and that's because Ronaldo's telling it. I really and truly don't entirely hate this thing, but it is my least favorite from season 2 so far. It's a little bit like the Uncle Grandpa episode, except that one could go a lot further with the strangeness and had the crossover appeal going for it. This one's gimmick just isn't as strong. The episode itself plays out a little bit like an ignorant SpongeBob or Tree Trunks episode. Ronaldo runs around thinking he's really onto something and actually doing something, when in reality he's affecting nothing. A lot of the frustration with this episode is that it would have been way better without Ronaldo. Getting to see the citizens react to the crystal gems and the events of the season 1 finale would have actually been pretty cool, but we only get a tiny bit of that in favor of Ronaldo derping around. The whole thing just tonally doesn't feel right. Ronaldo feels a little bit more on the one-dimensional side here than an actual person like he does in other episodes. Again, it's not a total flop, but unfortunately, Ronaldo is one of the biggest problems here. As far as all his other appearances, I think he's perfectly fine, seeing as he only really gets one line or a non-speaking cameo. The other main character trait of Ronaldo is his geekiness. He loves old horror movies with the original special effects. He has his own blog and live streams and makes videos and likes anime and participates in boards that debate subs versus dubs. Or maybe he doesn't participate in them because he hates them and thinks they're a distraction, but he still knows about them, and that's important enough to my point, and I'm just rambling. Point is, he is a geek, and what's a little bit frustrating about this is that he is clearly the character that's supposed to appeal to my demographic. Us nerds that go online and talk about the show a lot. Heck, his blog is actually a real website that you can go and visit. It's a little bit unfortunate that this character trait is very much overshadowed by the conspiracy thing. As much as I'd love to say that I can relate to him, I really can't. And don't get me wrong, I do not take Ronaldo as an insult. I don't think the show is trying to say that adults who obsess over the show are crazy or anything like that. Ronaldo would probably say something like that, but I wouldn't. I just wish we got to see a little bit more of his geeky side, as the conspiracy thing can get a little bit one note at times, and is pretty hard to relate to. Another episode that I think is worth mentioning in regards to Ronaldo is his actions in Full Disclosure. When Steven isn't sure what to tell Connie because he's afraid he's gonna freak her out with the news that he was almost abducted and killed by aliens, Steven comes across Ronaldo. Ronaldo gives him the advice that he should not tell Connie what's going on and that he should walk a lonely path in order to protect everyone that he cares about. I know some people are gonna disagree with me here, but I think that's pretty sound advice from Ronaldo, because in truth, Connie would be a lot safer having not known Steven. Now, I'm not saying Steven's decision was wrong, because I don't think Steven is the kind of person who can walk away from someone, and I think in the end, Steven really needs Connie. Also, I realize this is a TV show, and as an audience, we want to see Steven and Connie be together and happy and working as a team, and we also want to see Connie on the show. But I think realistically, if Steven wanted to make absolutely sure nothing bad would ever happen to her, he would leave her alone and make sure she stays far away from Gem stuff. It's kind of interesting that in this case, Ronaldo is the voice of reason in the sad truth of the matter, though it's probably just a case of him reading too many comic books. It's also a little bit sad here how Steven reaches out for Ronaldo to help and support him during this tough time, and Ronaldo just runs off to collect pieces of the spaceship. Once again proving my point that it wasn't purely Lars's fault that their friendship fell apart. Ronaldo definitely needs to learn to be a little bit more considerate about other people's feelings and emotions, as opposed to just running off with whatever idea he has in his head. So now, before we end things, I would like to talk about Ronaldo's relationship to other characters. Let's start off with his relationship to the crystal gems, mainly the fact that there isn't one. The great irony, and one of the weird things about Ronaldo, is that he is literally, and I mean literally, on top of the weirdest thing probably in that entire world, that is the crystal gems, that is his lighthouse is literally above them, and yet Ronaldo doesn't seem to care very much about them. I guess this kind of makes sense when you consider that the crystal gems have probably been a part of his life ever since he was born, if he was born at Beach City. So to him and everyone else, they're kind of normal in a way. And I guess you could argue that based upon Ronaldo's wording, it seems like a lot of these conspiracies have to deal with him and the way he perceives things, and finding out that it's about the crystal gems and Steven doesn't make him the hero, doesn't make him the main character, it makes Steven the main character. But it's still a little bit weird that he's not at least a little bit interested in the crystal gems, and how he can just punch Pearl in the hand and she doesn't feel anything. Steven considers himself a friend of Ronaldo's, but then again, Steven considers himself a friend of pretty much everyone's. Steven, feeling crushed that he accidentally exposed Ronaldo to the harsh truth of things, decides to go as far as to dress up like a snake person to help him with his delusions. Interestingly enough though, at the end of the episode, Steven isn't the one that tells Ronaldo to keep on being a conspiracy nut. Steven, quite frankly, isn't sure if that's the right thing to do or not. It's Petey who decides that the best thing for Ronaldo is to let him keep living with his delusions. And that, my friends, brings us to a much more interesting character to talk about in respects to relating back to Ronaldo. Petey, his little brother. Now, Petey has only been the main character in one episode so far and has been kinda sidelined for the rest of the series. Hopefully we'll get another episode on him so that maybe I can do a video all to his own, but for right now I'm going to talk about him a little bit here. So in Frybo, we meet Petey, who is a very stressed out youth. He is desperately trying to get out of his lame job as this lame mascot for the Fry place, and once him and Steven finally get out of there, where Petey has this to say. Yikes. Petey is very wise beyond his years. In fact, one could say he's almost too wise and almost too aware of the harsh realities of working a job and being an adult. I didn't realize it at first because this episode comes very early in Steven Universe and the episodes featuring Ronaldo happen later on, but Petey is the opposite of Ronaldo. They're foils for each other. Petey is way too aware of reality and the harshness of it, whereas Ronaldo's off living in some fantasy, ignoring reality altogether. This explains why Petey wanted Ronaldo to live with his delusions. Petey got to see firsthand how miserable Ronaldo was living in the real world. And Petey himself knows how miserable it is. So he would rather see his brother happy with his delusion because Petey has to live with the sadness of reality, but Ronaldo doesn't. Petey also is the one filming Ronaldo's documentary, showing that he's willing to go along and placate Ronaldo in whatever weird adventure he's going on. And if I had to guess, I would probably say that Ronaldo's weirdness is a little bit of an escape for Petey. Maybe when he's with Ronaldo, he can step into his world. But at present, that's just speculation, as we've yet to really have an episode that explores their sibling dynamic, though I really hope there is one in the future. Now, personally speaking, I'm someone who believes in the truth above all else, despite the sadness that might come of it. I think that you're better off living in the real world than some kind of crazy fantasy, but I can definitely see why Petey does what he does. I would also really like to see an episode that focuses on Ronaldo's relationship with his dad. We've only really seen glimpses of it, but it seems like his dad is at least a little bit miffed that Ronaldo's always running off doing his own weird little thing instead of focusing more on the family business. His dad is definitely aware that Ronaldo's way more out there than Petey. In political power, he even says that Petey will be fine without power, but Ronaldo will definitely not be. The only other characters Ronaldo has really interacted with is Lars and Sadie in Horror Club. Throughout the episode, Lars treats Ronaldo like Lars treats everyone else. He's a jerk. He's a jerk to Ronaldo, he's a jerk to Steven, he's a jerk to Sadie. Which works in that episode's favor because you don't really expect that Lars and Ronaldo have some kind of backstory. It just seems like Lars is being Lars. Lars shoots him down every time Ronaldo mentions that it could be a ghost. But of course, Ronaldo isn't gonna back down. It's a continuation of the theme that was introduced in Keep Beach City Weird, where Lars is miserable with the truth, although technically, yeah, gem stuff is going on, but roll with it because he's being more realistic than Ronaldo. And Ronaldo is happier than Lars, but living with lies. It's an interesting dynamic because, well, if this were a real situation, I would have sided with Lars, but at the same time, Lars is being a total jerk about it and is totally miserable for being that way. Ultimately, Ronaldo and Lars are both really stubborn people. Ronaldo wants to believe what he wants to believe and won't let anyone tell him otherwise, and Lars is dedicated to being the cool guy, not showing emotion or getting attached. As far as Ronaldo's relationship with Sadie, well, the two of them are standing next to each other in Watermelon Steven, but they're not properly introduced until Horror Club, where Sadie shows up to his, well, Horror Club. When Ronaldo first suggests that it could be ghosts, Sadie interestingly thinks he's kidding. She clearly doesn't know Ronaldo very well at this point. Ronaldo admires how take charge of the situation she is, which we learned is something that she very much is in Island Adventure. The two share a laugh with each other, and Ronaldo tries to save her later on, trying to sacrifice Lars in her place. Once again showing that he is a danger to others. It's unclear whether there's some sort of possible romantic feelings between them, or if it's just in a friendly way. The dynamic between Lars, Sadie, and Ronaldo is interesting. Lars confronts Sadie and asks her if she genuinely believes that there's a ghost going on and tells her that they should ditch Steven and Ronaldo. Sadie isn't entirely convinced it's a ghost, but at the same time she doesn't like Lars's attitude and doesn't want to abandon anyone, which interestingly enough makes her kind of a middle ground between the two. She's not as willing to believe ridiculous claims like Ronaldo is, but at the same time she's not ready to shoot them down either or be a jerk like Lars is. And that is Ronaldo Fryman. Overall, I think he's actually a pretty good character. When you get right down to it, the only time he really dips into annoying, ignorant character territory is Rising Tides, Crashing Skies. In Keep Beach City Weird and Horror Club, he might come off a little bit annoying at first, but when you really watch the episodes and pay attention to the stories they're trying to tell, you realize that Ronaldo's weirdness isn't just a punchline. And so he's not really annoying there. there. I do worry that in the wrong hands he could turn into more of an annoying character in more of his appearances, but I do also have faith that the Crewniverse know what they're doing. He'll never be my favorite Steven Universe character, but he's definitely an interesting one. Let me know what character you'd like me to do a character review on next. Pie Guy Rules, out.